Hello, I'm Clive Johnson, coming today from the village of East Hoathly, East Sussex in the UK. Welcome to Impact, a podcast about how we can each bring about real change in the world and getting practical in making that happen.
And hello, I'm Ellen Bintz, coming today from Wheaton, Illinois in the USA. A special welcome if you're listening for the first time, and a big thank you to our new subscribers. Each week, we look at one aspect of how we can connect our hearts to offer healing for others with our collective intention, prayers, and meditation, and go behind the headlines of a critical happening in our world that needs our attention right now.
In today's episode, we take one of these regular deep dives to more fully understand and tune in with something many of us may know only a little about, and see where we might home in with our prayers and intentions. And as we record, it's Wednesday, 22nd of January, 2025. Just a few days away now from International Holocaust Remembrance Day, also honoured as Holocaust Memorial Day in the UK, which is marked on January 27th. That's next Monday, ahead of our recording, which marks the victims of genocides past and present through ceremonies, vigil, film, spoken testimony, and community gatherings to honour victims and survivors. These activities aim to remind us to stop, to remember the horror of genocide, and serve to educate our younger generation and others who may not be aware about the realities of the Holocaust and other genocides, including the continuing risk of man's inhumanity to man escalating to committing similar atrocities in the future. And this year, this important day will especially mark and remember the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau 80 years ago, as well as the 30th anniversary of the genocide in Bosnia in the early 1990s. It comes, as we know, at a time when antisemitism, Islamophobia, racism, xenophobia, and other forms of intolerance, hostility, and suspicion towards different communities are on the rise in many countries, including in our own. UNESCO's International Day of Commemoration in memory of the victims of the Holocaust, also commemorating victims of Nazi persecution and the Holocaust, takes place just before this coming Monday. That day is marked on the 23rd of January, which is around the time this podcast should drop.
Auschwitz-Birkenau, as you may know, was the largest Nazi concentration camp and extermination center. For many, it is a symbol of the Holocaust, or Shoah, as it is known in Hebrew. Over 1 million Jews and 100,000 members of the other ethnicities and sexualities, including Roma, gays, and Soviet captives, were killed there. Mass slaughtering of innocent human beings was continuing until just days before the camp was liberated. Genocide in Bosnia during the Bosnian War of 1992 to 1995 primarily targeted the Bosnian Muslim civilians, and especially men and boys, with the most notorious event being the Srebrenica massacre of July 1995. Bosnian Serb forces, led by Ratko Mladic and supported by Serbia, set about ethnic cleansing to remove all Bosnian Muslims from the territory and create a, quote, greater Serbia. Around 100,000 died and over 2 million people were displaced as a result of the atrocities committed by Mladic and his supporters.
So what is the purpose of Holocaust Memorial Day? Holocaust Memorial Day, or HMD, remembers the victims of all genocide. The 6 million Jews murdered during the Holocaust and millions of other victims of Nazi persecution, but also genocides in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, Ukraine, here talking about what was going on in the 1930s under Stalin, Namibia, Armenia, and Darfur, not to mention some of the atrocities committed by imperialist and generally white-led invasions of the homelands and massacre of people of many nationalities and indigenous cultures in such places as the Congo, Kenya, Australia, India, North America, and elsewhere. Although according to some historians, technically, some of these aren't considered genocide according to its legal definition. Shamefully, and perhaps soberingly, our own country folk played a part in many of these atrocities. I was particularly thinking about the shameful behaviour of a lot of the British in the Victorian period and earlier. The day features various commemorative events, including ceremonies, educational programs, and media coverage to ensure that the stories of Holocaust survivors and victims are shared with future generations.
HMD promotes learning about genocide, encouraging people to understand the causes and consequences of these atrocities, and encourages reflection on the fragility of freedom and the importance of protecting human rights. It provides an opportunity to honor the survivors of genocide and reaffirm shared goals of mutual understanding and justice, while raising awareness about ongoing issues of prejudice, discrimination, and racism in today's world. It encourages people to take action to create a safer, more tolerant future and to resist hatred and discrimination in their communities. We agree with HMD's premise that societies that can learn from the past, empathize with those affected by genocide, and work towards building a better, more inclusive future are essential to ensure the future security, well-being, and happiness of us all.
So, where is genocide still happening today? Which is sadly the fact there are several ongoing situations described as genocides or potential genocides. A website we quite often refer to, Genocide Watch, the link of which is in the description, show notes, I should say. I'll say description for this video. Think of YouTube there. In our show notes includes the link through to Genocide Watch, which has lots of country reports and flagging those that are actually getting near, as it were. They're not quite reaching this very strict, high bar almost definition of genocide, but are still causes of major concern. But those classified or thought to be close to that are the Gaza Strip, where Israel has been accused by Amnesty International and several prominent UN officials of carrying out a genocide against Palestinians during its invasion and bombing of the territory. Happily now, as we know, in a period of at least temporary ceasefire. In West Darfur, where the Rapid Support Forces and allied Arab militias have been committing organized mass killings of Masalit civilians and other non-Arab communities since 2023. We reported on that in a previous episode. And in Rakhine State in Myanmar, again, something we featured in a former episode, where the genocide of the Rohingya Muslims by Myanmar's military has been ongoing since 2016, nearly 10 years now. Recognition of ongoing genocide can be slow. For example, the genocide in Darfur, I found this quite remarkable, was only formally acknowledged by the US government. As we recall, actually when this note was put together, we were still in the Biden administration, 2 weeks ago, on the 7th of January this year. This is partly due to the scale of atrocities often not being known and the strict legal criteria that defines an act of genocide.
The effects of genocide committed by the Nazis and others in history still being felt today. Well, they continue to reverberate today as survivors and their descendants still grapple with the psychological impact of these atrocities, affecting future generations and being held in memory as collective trauma. Holocaust denial and distortion persist, not helped by the weakening moderation of misinformation and hate speech that often spreads on some social media platforms. This brings home the need for such claims to be called out and for the ongoing necessity to educate all about the causes and consequences of genocide as a serious warning to prevent against similar atrocities occurring. Seems like common sense, and I'm sorry that I had to read that sentence because in humanity, it seems like we should know this.
We should do. I think it's particularly worrying, isn't it, with the trolling and the abuse that goes on social media. I'm not personally aware. It's not something I've tuned into or looked into around denial and those who deliberately antagonize victims and survivors, on second generation, third generation families of victims of genocide as well. But we can we can believe that's going on. And my goodness.
Well, I think we're seeing that, and we might want to remind our listeners that we did an episode about this last year where I conveyed a personal story about my in-laws from the Ukraine who were held as forced laborers. But my sister-in-law is in her 80s now, and there are not many survivors from Nazi Germany. And we can see in Germany, as we're going to cover in a few weeks, the rise of the party that is being led by people who don't remember what happened. So it is critical to remind people of the consequences, as we just said, and keep remembering it.
Very striking is in Germany, especially, where there has been quite a long period now, nearly 80 years almost, since the Second World War, where that memory has been kept alive, and it's so under threat now of being not forgotten, but denied, and certainly not given the prominence, because we are into maybe second, third generation. And really quite chilling. And we'll put the link to that wonderful episode in the show notes as well. So where might we hone in with our intentions and prayers? As we introduced last week, we are moving to a slightly new format in the podcast in which we invite you to join us in holding energy as we hone in on specific themes. We'll introduce each of the suggested themes that came to us in turn, and then allow a little time for this collective shared sending of energy and our prayers before moving on to the next. So if you're able, you may want to make this time, or make this a time when you can close out other distractions, come to a place where you can be fully grounded, and share with us in sending intention or offering prayers as feels right for you. So let's just take a moment to allow ourselves to come into this space, to really resolve to be present as best we can for hearing and offering these intentions, offering these prayers if you prefer, letting our energy flow, noticing how you are feeling physically grounded at the moment, so your connection with the chair or the floor, whatever is supporting you, a reminder of an assured foundation, and come to a point where you feel connected with your inner self, where you can allow this vibration, this desire to resonate, where you can speak your prayer or speak your intention. And let us start by giving thanks for and honoring the survivors of genocide who continue to face opposition simply for sharing their testimonies. And again, that may include those online and on social media. Let us will that the truth that they speak will connect with new audiences and impress upon those of us who have not been the victims of such atrocity that humanity's capacity knows no evil and must always be opposed. Let us pray that they have courage and will be sustained in their work, especially in the face of abuse and denial by some.
Let us give wisdom for the second and third generations of genocide survivors and their testimonies, and desire to tell the world about the lived experiences of their loved ones, and will not fall on a diminished interest as years pass, but continue to resonate with both the current and with future generations.
We might ask that all survivors of genocide receive comfort, hope, and healing to help them overcome trauma and painful memories. We include in our intentions and prayers those who have lost loved ones to genocide, who have themselves or who are close to others who have been murdered, tortured, or physically, mentally, and emotionally traumatized by past evils.
We will that the international community, especially as represented by the United Nations, will stand firm in every way it can to prevent genocide and to exert influence or intervention as wisdom directs to prevent current situations escalating into genocide or where genocide is already observed.
Let us will that current conflicts will not continue to be exploited by some extremists to stir up hatred against groups they oppose, including anti-Muslim and anti-Semitic sentiment. For the affected communities that feel vulnerable in the face of hostility and suspicion towards them, let us pray for comfort, guidance, and courage.
We remember and honor all who have lost their lives simply for being perceived as different by those who have committed genocide against them and the groups to which they belong.
And we will that the educational campaigns and media focus on this Memorial Day and with the anniversaries of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau and of the genocide in Bosnia will raise the visibility of the realities of genocide to stir compassion among many millions of people. We will that this visibility will highlight the inhumanity that powerful people and groups can exert over others, bringing home to all a need for compassionate coexistence with others, where there may be fear, resentment, or of prejudice against those having different ideologies, ethnicities, sexualities, or other characteristics to their own.
Let us direct intention for all governments to be alert to act against the threat of escalation of atrocity and prejudice toward genocide, and that they will be swift to condemn, acknowledge, and work toward influencing an end to genocide when this occurs. May those who hold power and influence in our societies always be mindful of and not deny past atrocities, that these may serve as reminders for the ongoing need for vigilance against hatred and discrimination in our world today.
And as Holocaust Remembrance is honoured and the anniversaries of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau and the genocide in Bosnia are remembered, we suggest holding as our main intention this week, we honour the victims and survivors of all past and present genocides, and ask that those who have passed will be at peace, and those who remain will receive courage, comfort, and always be protected in healing light. Please join us in holding this.
Well, we know that this episode has been heavy on our hearts and one that we want to definitely feel in our hearts. So on another note, just a reminder that Legacy Labyrinth Project will be doing an event on February 1st, and our title is Joy is a Form of Resistance. And we're going to talk about not just, we need to be joyful, but why, the science behind it, and how it helps our world for us to be joyful and to stay in those high vibration emotions, and how that can be impactful for all of us. So please, if you would like to join us, visit Legacy Labyrinth Project. We'll absolutely put the information in the show notes, but you can go to the website and sign up. We would love to have you on the Zoom on February 1st.
Wonderful. Wonderful. That sounds, it's going to be a really, really good and important workshop by the sounds of things.
And we already have over 100 people signed up from all over the world.
Wow,
so it's clearly something people are looking for.
Yes. Is it one of these on mountain time again for us UK folks?
It is. Yes. I'm sorry, Clive. It is at 6:00 Central Time, 7:00 Eastern Time. So maybe you could take a nap in the afternoon, but it's a Saturday. So,
it could be your Saturday on Sunday morning,
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I'm sorry, Clive.
We'll have to see. Anyway, we'll put the link where you can find all the details in the show notes. And it does sound very, very good to join if you can.
It will be rich.
Yeah, I'm sure.
That about wraps it up for this episode. Remember, you can connect with us in the Facebook group and for live intention holding in Clive's Daily Insight Timer offerings, and with me in the Labyrinth Activist Network's Zoom calls. Details of how to hook up with these are in our show notes. Look out too for our next special topic episode, which we'll be releasing in the next few days. Thank you for listening and for sharing with us and holding intentions. We look forward to connecting again next time. And in the meantime,
thank you. Go well. Stay safe.
And remember, we're more powerful together.
Impact is presented by Ellen Vince and Clive Johnson and produced by Impact Productions. Our theme music is by Chris Collins and our logo artwork is by Auto Classic. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, or your favorite podcast provider. We're a non-commercial podcast dedicated to people of any faith tradition or none who yearn for healing in our troubled world. Please pass on the word so others may join us in making an impact. Thank you for listening.